A raging storm, a captain reborn, the pantheon of the gods, shamelessly torn. Throne of the blood god, empty it rests, with the scarlet of thousands adorning its crest. One shall fill the empty crowd, then another will split the burden they've found. The voices they sing of unending blood, and wait for a new master to tame their flood. A long time ago, the god of dying renounced his title and throne to revive a loved one. He gained a new title, bringing a new chair to the table of the gods. As a result, his original throne has been left vacant for centuries, gaining dust as it patiently awaits its new master. His crown of blood unpolished, the voices he left behind growing hungry. The goddess of death wonders who will take on the forsaken role of her executioner. Why the god relinquished his role is a story for another time. Here is how the new blood god came to be. Hey everyone, welcome back to a brand new Dream SMP Headcanon lore video. It's been a while since I've said that line. Anyway, sorry to keep you all waiting, but I'm back baby, and since you guys have been requesting it, here is the part 2 to Techno's origin lore. And bonus, it's also part of Phil's lore. Since this is my first video of 2022, I worked really hard on the art and story for you guys. So if you like the video, maybe consider subscribing. I'm trying to hit 5,000 subscribers this year, so I would really appreciate it if you helped me toward that goal. Some trigger warnings before we start. The video includes depictions of blood, eyes without a face. I don't know what that specific fear is called, but I heard some people get triggered by it. And it might also trigger trypophobia, which is the fear of holes. I'll put another visual warning later for anyone watching who might want to switch to another tab during those parts. Now, without further ado, here's the story you've been waiting for. Draw, relax, get ready for bed, do whatever you want while listening. Overall, enjoy. Technoblade is a half-piglin, half-human teenager, age 18. It has been about 10 years since he first escaped to the overworld, running from the horde of zombie piglins that destroyed his village. He has been living with an avian man named Philza and Phil's demigod sons, Wilbur and Tommy. There was also a boy named Tubbo, just a year older than Tommy, who they found at the side of the road a few years after Techno came to live with them. When Techno's 18th birthday comes around, a certain goddess of death had told Phil the exact date. He asked for an adventure. It had been a while since Philza went on a proper adventure, having settled down for quite a few years to take care of his kids. But Wilbur, Tommy, and Tubbo had grown, and he knew that his goddess would keep a careful eye on them regardless. A short adventure wouldn't hurt. The day came for Phil and Techno to embark on their journey. They said their goodbyes. "Aw, mate, don't cry. We'll only be gone for 2 weeks," Phil says, hugging a tearful 10-year-old. "Shut up, I'm not crying," Tommy sniffles. "Just don't die or whatever." Techno chuckles. "Trust me, kid, dying is not on my agenda. Even if you did, I'm sure Mumsa would let us resurrect you. But please don't. It'll probably be a lot of trouble." Wilbur jokes. "Bye, bring us back something cool," Tubbo calls as they set off on their horses. Phil could fly, but he figured he'd have an easier time keeping pace with Techno if they were both on horseback. The two wave as the home in the woods shrinks from view. Eventually, they make it to the main road where they had found Tubbo all those years ago. "You still haven't told me exactly where we're going, by the way," Techno points out. "Oh, that's right," Phil recalls. "Well, there's this desert a few days' travel from here. People have been saying that strange things happen there." "Strange like what?" "Magical creature appearances. They call them dune sharks." "Dune sharks? Are they like silverfish?" "From the pictures I've seen, no. They look much, much worse." "Great." Phil laughs. "Don't worry, there's a pretty good chance they're just desert mirages. People tend to hallucinate in deserts." "I guess we better hope so, or else Wilbur really is gonna have to figure out how to bring us back to life," Techno deadpans. He rests one hand on his diamond sword, which had been a present from Wilbur. How Wilbur had managed to get his hands on a diamond sword, he wasn't sure. He was a little afraid to ask. The little moth and bee stickers on the scabbard were gifts from Tommy and Tubbo. "I'm mainly worried about the pillagers," Phil continues. "They say there's 1 or 2 outposts in the area, and the pillagers there tend to be extra aggressive. But I also think that means that whatever it is they're protecting must be very valuable." Techno hums. I do like valuables." "Me too." They travel for the rest of the day, chatting and taking a few breaks every now and then. Phil tells Techno stories from the past, such as previous adventures he'd been on when he was younger or mishaps from when Wilbur and Tommy were growing up. He even tells a few about the goddess of death. You know, she messaged me once through a refrigerator when Will was young. He thought his mother was a fridge ever since, and I just haven't had the heart to tell him that he isn't half kitchen appliance. Prime, he's an idiot. What about Tommy? Does he know? Oh, he knows. Then why hasn't he told Will? To mess with him, of course. We have a bet going. As of now, if Will figures out the truth by his next birthday, Tommy will have to do every chore I tell him to do without any complaints for a month. If not, Tommy gets no chores for a month. I hope he loses then, Techno snorts. No chores for Tommy means more chores for the rest of them. By nightfall, they stop at a small roadside village and rent a motel room. A boy heads out to take their horses to the motel stables as the receptionist hands them their room key. They head to their room to drop off their packs, then return outside to have dinner at a local diner. After they receive their food, the waiter makes idle talk. So, where are you fellas headed? The dead ocean, Phil responds casually, taking a bite of his dinner. That turns some heads. It even elicits a couple of gasps from surrounding patrons and the waiter himself. Techno glances around curiously while he chews. He swallows and asks, "Is it really that bad?" "We've had too many adventurers come by saying they're journeying for the dead ocean," the waiter replies, holding his empty tray close. "And they never make it out like they promise. Only a few make it back. They're the smart ones who didn't dare travel too deep." "And it's no wonder," adds a lady who is dining near their table. "Not if you've heard the legends surrounding that wretched place." "You mean the rumors about the pillagers and dune sharks?" Phil inquires. The lady shakes her head. "No, I mean the legend of how those sands came to be." "Ah, I see." "Well, I don't," Techno says. "What happened to that place?" The lady turns to face them more comfortably from where she's seated. "They say that desert used to be the home of the god of dying." "You mean the goddess of death?" She shakes her head. "No, the goddess of death is the empress of spirits who manages souls in the afterlife. The god of dying was her executioner, her co-worker, if you will. He represented the act of dying and took souls to the afterlife." "Oh, well, what happened to that god? Did they die?" "No," the lady answers again. I'm afraid I don't know the full story in detail, but I believe the legend states that someone the god cared for very much died, and he discarded his throne to revive her, something like that. And because he gained a new role, he abandoned his old home and it became the dead ocean." "That place is haunted," the waiter mutters. Techno is confused. "By what, though? If the god didn't die and he wasn't in charge of spirits like the goddess of death, then what's the dead ocean haunted by?" "No one's sure. Just remember that if you begin to hear voices that aren't your own," the lady warns, "you'd be doing yourselves a favor by turning around." With that, she and the other patrons return to their meals. The waiter leaves with a slight bow before going back to work. Techno stares at his plate. He isn't shaken at all, not in the slightest. Absolutely not. But he does feel somewhat reassured by Phil's small smile and whisper of, "Remember, death is on our side." They finish dinner and retire for the night. The next few days and nights were similar, regardless of whether they set up camp on the side of the road or settled into an inn. The dead ocean was rather infamous. Quite a few people, travelers and villagers alike, had heard of the place. However, they all told varying tales of what to expect in the desert. "When I was a young lass, my father returned from the edge of the sands and had nightmares of a field of graves for years. I've heard that the abandoned minions of the old god continue to roam the land as giant sentries. Dune sharks? Never heard of them, but I've been told that there is a special species of desert spiders there with a venom so potent it can kill a man in 2 shakes of a dog's tail." The one thing all the stories managed to agree on, though, was that the desert's god was gone and that it was haunted by something. Something worse than extra-aggressive pillagers, worse than dune sharks, worse than giant golden sentries and venomous spiders. And Phil and Techno had every intention of discovering what it was. They follow a fairly large river and reach the Deadlands, an expanse of badlands that earned its name for serving as the border between the dead ocean and the rest of the world. Techno marvels at the red sand and multicolored cliffs, relishing the increase in heat. It reminds him of his old home in the Nether. There is a little town in the Deadlands known as Lifeline, a final stop for daring adventurers and a first stop for those lucky enough to leave the dead ocean alive. The townspeople made a living off of a few hardy crops and used the exporting of cactus dye, ores, glass, and other mineral goods to import food they couldn't grow themselves. A couple of wells dot the land here and there, while a man-made irrigation system, created by digging trenches that branch off the river Phil and Techno had followed, hydrate the soil enough for the small population of crops. They stop again at another inn, passing their horses off to the stable hand before entering. Unlike all the other towns they visited on their journey, the people of Lifeline weren't curious about where they were headed. They already knew. No newcomers came to Lifeline without cargo unless they were destined for one place, and one place only. A waitress with auburn hair brought their dishes over. Setting them on the table, she says, "It's been a while since one of you came here, much less two. I thought there were finally enough stories going around to stop adventurers from coming to these parts." "Not enough to stop us, I'm afraid," Phil replies with a grin. "So, what are you two looking for? Gold? Emeralds? Artifacts?" "Nothing much," Phil shrugs and he gestures towards Techno. "He asked for a proper adventure for his birthday, so this is my gift to him." The waitress bursts out laughing. "A gift? Notch above, you might as well be handing him his death on a silver platter," she hoots, raising her silver tray for emphasis. "I haven't heard an excuse that ridiculous in a while." "It's true. You're serious." Her expression darkens. "Now you two listen here. The dead ocean is no joke. Anybody can tell you that, especially after what happened to old man Conrad." Techno decided to humor the poor, distressed woman and take the bait. "What happened to old man Conrad?" "He was the only one to venture farthest into the dead ocean. Everyone else in his party disappeared, dead most like. He was young when it happened, but he came back looking like he aged 100 years and then some. I still remember the day that he returned. And the stories he came back with gave the entire town nightmares for a month." "What did he see? Golden centuries? A field of graves?" "I think he mumbled something along those lines, but those weren't the worst. The thing that ruined him was at the center, the heart of the dead ocean. That place everyone tries to get to, and no one escapes." "But Conrad did?" Phil asks. The waitress nods. "Physically, yes. Mentally, no. For a while, all he could talk about were those temple ruins. Great crumbling ruins, he said, right at the heart. And in the largest one, a throne of black skulls." "Skulls?" Techno repeats. "I mean, that's terrible, but I was expecting something worse." "There's something else. Conrad just never got round to saying it. He could never get the words out of his mouth." I see. Should we go ask this Conrad guy? Maybe he could tell us a little more if we tell him where we're going," Techno suggests to Phil, but the waitress shakes her head. "I'm sorry, but I'm afraid that ain't possible. Old man Conrad died about 3 years ago." Techno cringes. He probably should have expected that. The guy had old man in his name. "We're, sorry to hear about his passing." "Oh, he didn't pass. Whatever he saw in the dead ocean made him mad. Eventually, he lost his mind. Got executed for shooting 3 folks. It was awful. He was such a nice fella before he went on his last adventure," the waitress informs grimly. "But if there's anything left for old man Conrad to pass on to you two, maybe remember this. His last words were, 'Blood for the blood god.'" The next morning, Phil and Techno entered the first sands of the dead ocean. The temperature increases the further in their horses tread. Techno enjoys it while he can, because by the look on Phil's face, he is certain that they won't be visiting another desert anytime soon. From time to time, Phil will take a break from riding and stretch his wings, letting the wind cool him off while he scouts ahead. Fortunately, the desert is treacherous, but not very large. About an hour into their day's journey, Phil swoops back down onto his horse. "I found the temple ruins, they're not far off. I'd say maybe another half hour." "Neat. Anything we need to look out for?" "I saw some golden statues, but they didn't seem to be moving. Looked pretty ordinary to me. Other than that, nothing else." Phil rests a hand on the hilt of the sword at his hip. "Keep your guard up, though. I'm sure all those legends and stories had some kind of truth to them." 15 minutes pass uneventfully. Then, 20 feet into the distance, Techno sees something shift in the sands. He squints. Hey, Phil, you see something moving up there? Phil shields his eyes and glances ahead. Nope, probably just the heat. Techno is about to point out that he isn't bothered by the heat when the sands move again, this time closer, to his left. He leans over and tugs Phil's sleeve. There, did you see that? What? There's nothing there, mate. Phil's brow furrows. Are you alright? Maybe all those people were right. Maybe it's not such a good idea to keep going. Phil! Behind you! A giant fin of brown stone breaks through the sand first, followed by a tail, which splashes them with the fine desert grains. Phil curses in surprise. A dune shock? They're real? Techno notices several more fins trailing behind them. I guess so! Run! The two urge their horses into a gallop, but the sharks continue to stay on their tail. One leaps out of the sands and opens its mouth, showing off rows of sharp teeth composed of rock. It was an absolute beast, maybe 40 feet long, maybe 50, and Techno wouldn't be surprised if its friends were similar. The ruins with their gilded statues come into view, pyramids and pillars of sandstone and clay, with a wall wrapping around every structure. Some of the towers had crumbled into the ground, while others still stand proud in the desert sun. The emerald eyes of the golden warriors stationed at the wall seem to follow the chase below. On your right, Phil shouts. Techno steers his steed left as massive jaws snap closed with a resounding thud, inches from where he used to be. The dune shark recedes into the sand. Despite the blazing heat, Techno suddenly feels gripped by freezing adrenaline. He focuses on the temple ahead, eyes roaming the walls for some kind of opening. The gate is closed and far too big for them to open themselves. If that Conrad guy managed to get in, there had to be an entrance somewhere else. When the statues begin to move, Techno thinks they're good as dead. Their emerald eyes flash a bright green. The two at the center of the wall outstretch one arm each, moving their hands to the handles of the gates. Their other hands remain gripped around spears that must be 200 feet tall. The other statues slowly move to kneel, bowing their heads as the doors open. Techno peeks over his shoulder again. The dune sharks have begun to swim closer together, forming a wave of rock and sand that quickly grows over their heads. They are practically at their horses' hooves. Any closer and Phil and Techno would be buried alive. The statues ahead pound their spear ends into the sand rhythmically. 2 beats, followed by a pause, a thundering heartbeat accompanying the hum of the desert. And for a moment, Techno feels as though something is calling out to him. Something within the ruins, a whisper, a murmur, calling out his name. The temple gates draw nearer. So do the sharks. 30 feet, 25 feet, 20, 15. The heartbeat speeds up. Its sound increases the closer they speed to the gates. The ground vibrates. The air vibrates. Techno can feel the beating in his ribs, competing with the racing of his own heart. 10 feet, 5, 3. The dune sharks crash down altogether, creating a wave of sand that sends Phil, Techno, and their steeds flying through the gates. They are flung from both their saddles and tumble roughly onto the sandstone courtyard of the temple. The thumping is at its fastest. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. The sentries close the gates. They shut with an echoing boom. It's quiet. Techno, are you alright? Phil rushes over, already back on his feet. Techno stands, brushing himself off. Their horses are shaken, but unharmed, laying on the ground where they had landed to calm down. I'm fine. You? Same here, although mentally I don't want to see another grain of sand for as long as I live. Fair enough. They take a moment to catch their breath and take in their surroundings. Some of the temple stones have cracked and weathered, but for the most part, the buildings are intact. Each tower, pyramid, and wall is massive, gleaming like gold in the sunlight. Some walls depict colorful mosaics composed of precious gemstones, miraculously untouched in spite of the many travelers that had previously ventured there. And speaking of gold and precious stones, a path of gold and lapis lazuli extends out from the gates where Phil and Techno stand. It stretches towards a gargantuan arch in the main pyramid. Techno feels compelled to walk towards the arch. His feet move before he even realizes what he's doing. Techno, where are you going? Phil calls. We need to go this way, Techno replies firmly. Phil sighs. I suppose starting there is as good a place as any. He catches up to Techno, patting sand out of his wings and readjusting his hat. The inside of the pyramid is vast and dark. There are more mosaics along the walls. Techno ignores them and continues striding forward. Normally, he'd be interested in studying such ancient works, but something is beckoning him, ordering him to move ahead. Phil falls behind, examining the images himself for a moment. There's a tiny skylight at the pyramid's peak, enabling the sun to shine down upon a broken beacon. Techno peers at the beacon only long enough to notice an inscription on the glass. Still, he marches right past. Whatever is stringing him along, it's not the beacon, and therefore, he has no time for it. Phil does, though. The older man flaps his wings lightly, hovering over to the beacon at the center. He kneels and inspects the words carved into the glass. The language is old, but thankfully, one he's studied before. Phil traces the letters, muttering the writing to himself as he reads. It's a prophecy. His blood runs cold at the last stanza. Phil shoots up. This expedition truly was a terrible idea. "Techno!" Phil shouts. His voice reverberates back to him in the empty room. Techno had already moved on to the next room, an area where the corner of the pyramid directly across from the entrance was sectioned off. Philza hurries to the smaller arch in the back wall. This room isn't as big as the last, but due to the sheer size of the pyramid, there is still plenty of space. It's darker too, however Phil can still make out the red stains splattered across the walls and floors. There are piles of items he first thinks are crumbled stones before realizing, with another jolt of fear, that they are bones. Some still wearing the armor their owners had worn in life, right up until the moment the temple's curse took their lives. "Techno!" Phil calls again, but Techno makes no indication of having heard. His boots continue to carry him down the blood-spattered aisle towards the crimson curtains at the end of the room. The curtains are drawn. Between them, within their shadows, lies a chair, a throne, and Phil knows it's made of black skulls. "Techno, come back! It isn't safe!" He tries to approach, but something freezes him in place. His limbs do not obey. On the seat of the throne, something begins to pulse a bright red. All Phil can do is watch as Techno walks on. When Techno had stepped foot into the throne room, the whisper had restarted in his ears. Each step he takes towards the throne, the louder the voice. No, the voices become. When he reaches the curtains and the crown pulses red, the voices are chanting and Techno can hear the same heartbeat the centuries had welcomed him with. "Your throne," they whisper. "Your crown." The crown on the skull throne is made of a scarlet metal, each peak shaped like a fang. Its radiance washes the black skulls in wine. It brightens as he reaches out. "Your voices." The crown vibrates in his palms. The ruby light from its metal drenches his hands. "Blood for the blood god! Blood for the blood god!" He lifts his arms and sets the crown on his head. A searing pain floods his mind like a million burning needles raking along every centimeter of his brain. His skin is searing, blistering at 1,000 degrees. It's so bright, and the red glow fills his vision, blinding him as his eyes shed streams of red tears that stain his white shirt. All he can see is the red. Hear is the red. Feel, smell, taste is the red of war, the red of violence, the red of blood, 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 the voices sing. He is red. Phil watches in horror as a crimson aura surrounds Techno, lifting him off the floor. A suffocating copper aroma invades the room. It's so heavy Phil can sense its weight in his lungs like a viscous mud. The scream Techno elicits is enough to snap Phil out of whatever frozen state the crown's magic had placed him under. He feels movement return to his fingertips first, though sluggish and staggering. He forces his legs to move one stumble forward. Reluctantly, they obey. Phil then tries to open his wings, but they unfurl only an inch, bound by an invisible string. The pressure on Phil's shoulders increases, forcing him to his knees. He takes all his strength not to give in and crumble completely to the floor. With effort, he manages to bring his hands to his chest. He can barely move. Trying to speak to Techno has no effect. There's really only one thing he has left to try: pray to his goddess. And so, Philza folds his hands together and bows his head, crying out in his mind, echoing his prayer softly aloud. Techno's howling continues. He does his best to shut out the shrieking, as much as it pains him, to focus on the image of flowing midnight hair and a warm smile so adoring, one could scarcely believe it came from death herself. "Please hear me," Phil murmurs. "Please help him. Help us." A gentle breeze ruffles his feathers. She's here. "You know, there is only one way to keep him from complete insanity," comes a soothing voice in his head, stemming from his heart. Are you sure you want to do this? I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Fulfill the prophecy. Please. Very well. Phil's hands glimmer purple. The second presence in the room grows stronger. He can sense the burdening pressure being lifted off his shoulders. It is replaced with a different weight, the weight of a serene embrace. The breeze, ever gentle, rushes a little faster. It kisses his forehead just beneath the brim of his hat, and the goddess of death grants Philza another blessing. Some of the red aura reaches towards Phil. The glow from his hands and the presence of death ease the pain and the chaos for him, turning the aura violet before it can touch him. When the headache blooms within Phil's brain, he knows this is only a fraction of what Techno had felt moments before. It wrought a ringing on his ears and a pounding on his bones. He does not weep, yet blood pools around his knees, staining his dark feathers like red wine on ink. As for Techno, he feels the burning recede to a warmth, then the warmth recede to a cooling blanket. The red begins to calm. His tears begin to dry. They leave carmine tracks down his cheeks, morbid face paint on display. The red aura retreats into his crown and lowers him to the ground where he collapses, heaving. On unsteady legs, Phil runs over. He places one careful hand on Techno's back and the other one on one of his shoulders. Slowly, Techno lifts his head to face him. Phil. What just happened? Phil hugs Techno tightly. He ponders on what to say before answering with a wry chuckle. I think I may have accidentally given you immortality for your birthday. Techno stiffens and leans away to stare at Phil incredulously. Heh? Thus, two gods were born that day, the spouse of death, her angel, and he who can tear down armies with a single blade, the blood god. And again, the pantheon of the gods was altered. Oh my gosh, I'm finally done. That took forever. You guys, I will post, I don't know if I'll post it in here or if I'll just make a separate bloopers video, but you guys have no idea how many takes I've had to do because I cannot do British accents because I'm American. Yeehaw! Ugh. So yeah, if you've made it to this part of the video, type, I don't know, crown. Type crown in the comments, and I'll respond to as many as I can with a poggers. As always, feel free to suggest characters whose story you'd like me to make a video on next in the comments too. And please pick American people so I don't have to... No, I'm kidding. Pick whoever you want, but seriously, why are accents so hard? If you just want to hear another story in general, here's a playlist of all the other Dream SMP story videos I've made. Warning, some of them do have terrible British accents because, again, I am American. Thanks for watching and listening. I'll see you next time. Bye!